This is episode 287 of the Super League pod. We went well off script this week to deal with some huge breaking news as we recorded. Tom Andrews somehow still got a fan news viewing for it though. There's also news of a potential Tim G refereeing comeback. Make your own minds up if it's just his way of offering up a fight to some Canadian kids. Speaking of Canada, we try to apply a sense of balance to the North American expansion conversation by slagging everyone off. We also round up the Super League irregular season with some machine-like stats and your fan views, then start the playoff guessing game. So strap in, it's SLP time. Hello listeners, welcome to episode 287 of the Super... I'm sounding uncertain because I'm not sure, but that's what I've got written down, of the Super League pod. This week you have myself, Mark, and I'm joined by Tim. Welcome back, Tim.
Cheers, thank you very much.
We're going to get your takes on all the crazy stuff that's been going on over the last couple of weeks, I think, today, because, we've not got as much game action to talk about. We can kind of freewheel a little bit as we go through the news, but do you want to, before we go off script, do you want to tell everyone about our sponsor?
Yes, this episode is sponsored by Rob's Toy Shop, where you can find a wide range of toys, gifts, rugby league birthday cards and more at Rob's Toy Shop on eBay. If you visit stores.ebay.co.uk/Rob's Toy Shop, and on any orders over £5 you can earn 5% cash back, and also 1% of your order value will go into the SLP coffers just by putting SLP discount, that's SLP discount, at checkout.
Yep, good stuff. Thanks for that. We've got a little bit of feedback that we're going to go through in a minute on one of the stories we covered last week, but probably didn't dig into enough because of the main stories we had to talk about last week. There'll be more Canada talk, as well as lots of signing and re-signing news to get to. Just the two Super League games to recap. Super League regular season ended with a shiny, very shiny new League Leaders Shield, actually shaped like a shield, and
no longer a hubcap. Heavily
mirrored. So I think the photographers in the Wigan dressing room had to be careful with that. We'll look back over some woefully inaccurate origin predictions that me and Alan came up with last week, as well as making our predictions as the playoffs start in Super League. I mean, after a long old year, we're in the final stretch. We're in the home stretch, Tim. Just the 3 weeks to go. But before we get into our normal flow of the news, we'll cover that feedback, and it's about a news story from last week. So Gav Leaf, at Gav_Leaf, said, Salford agreed to that payment deal as a buyout so they could continue in Super League as the same club instead of going under and starting again like Bradford did. They took this opportunity to default on the repayments and dodge the punishment. So we talked about the Salford 6-point deduction last week, but mostly from the sort of RFL haven't done something disgracefully embarrassing angle rather than the Salford angle. Alan briefly kind of touched on how if there was a year that they were going to default on repayments in, it would be this year with the financial pressures that this year has brought. But Gav's kind of put in a bit more to that. So how do you feel about how Salford have kind of worked through this 6-point deduction for failing to satisfy their financial obligations that they agreed with the RFL when the new owners took over the club in 2013?
I think, there's a cynical way of looking at it, that they've got rid of it this year when there's no danger of relegation and there's no, it's a justifiable excuse they haven't got any money because nobody's got any money. And to be honest, I kind of think it's probably closer to that they just couldn't get an actual agreement and it was been agreed on possibly bad terms, or there was some sort of technicality in there they didn't agree to. I don't really think it was a malicious intent to avoid paying anything. I think it was more they had something hanging over them and they just physically couldn't at this point.
Yeah, and no one's going to be too damning, I suppose, in their criticism of them if they defaulted on those payments this year. This year being different to other years with clubs having extra costs whilst not receiving the same kind of revenues. The testing and that sort of thing around the cost side of it, whilst no crowds, restrictions on how you operate your normal income streams as well, like the shop and stuff like that for the clubs. And so I suppose they've got away with it in that sense. I would say the dodge the punishment concept. So this was a deferred 6-point penalty that would have been applied at the time if the new owners of the new club, it was a new club, didn't agree to carry to sort of pay some of this debt. So my understanding is when the new owners of Wakefield came in, I think a year later, because at that point the insolvency rules around the Rugby Football League had changed to a 12-point deduction. Wakefield did satisfy their debts that they needed to, whereas Salford clearly got to a stage where they've stopped satisfying those debts. So Salford would have got a 6-point penalty at the time as the old club, and that would have left them in exactly the same league position where they were at that time, and with no relegation on them at that time in 2013. And so it's kind of just they've waited. They could have done this in many other years and not got relegated as well, So it feels a bit more like it's the financial circumstances this year, but it does seem like they've taken advantage of a loophole here to make the punishment not really hurt them significantly. However, other clubs were trying to be a part of the league without taking the now 12-point points penalty for not satisfying your debts on taking over a club. So, were Salford that dirty in this? I'm not. I think they've been a bit savvy, and I don't like that they're not paying their debts to the sport. I think they should be criticised for that if that's what's happened. Because it does seem that that's what happened. Definitely, Salford should be criticised for that, and people should challenge them on that. At the same time, 2020.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not like Salford wrote a letter to anyone saying give us just a 2-point deduction instead, I think is my point.
Yeah, and they probably actually did the meetings from the office as well.
But, it is a bit poor faith on Salford's part. But Gav, thanks for that. We appreciated the opportunity to dig into that a bit more and take maybe a bit more critical eye on the Salford edge of that, as well as just the RFL side that we kind of looked at last week, because I kind of think the RFL couldn't do much different to what has happened. Okay, we're now going to move on to the news from around the world of Rugby League.
So on to the news, and Leeds Rhinos prop Mikolaj Alecki has signed a new 4-year deal with the Super League club. The 21-year-old's new contract comes after he helped them to a 14th Challenge Cup triumph, starting in October's win over Salford at Wembley. He has featured 66 times for the club since graduating from the academy, making his senior debut in 2017. Very good bit of business, securing a cornerstone of their pack, hopefully for years to come for Leeds.
Yeah, he's been probably their best prop forward this year, certainly consistently over the whole year. Say Umanafani's had a good period around the October time, but Alecki's been really good. 66 times he's played. I'm a little surprised it's that high. I guess he's probably wasn't used in huge minutes in a lot of his earlier performances, but that's paying off now, because he seems at 21 pretty much fully developed as a Super League prop forward.
Yeah, because he'd sort of drifted a bit under Ferner, and it was sort of looked like he was sort of slipped down the pecking order a bit. And it seems he's really come into his own under Agar. It's someone who they've obviously invested in, and they've actually, it's starting to really come good for them now.
Yeah, definitely. But speaking of Richard Agar and things not coming so good, Leeds Rhinos head coach Agar will miss the club's playoff game with the Catalan Dragons. after a member of the club's coaching staff tested positive for COVID-19. Agar, as well as first-team coach Jamie Jones-Buchanan, has been forced to self-isolate to comply with the track and trace guidelines. So assistant coaches James Webster and very newly appointed Sean Long will lead preparations for the club's playoff game with Catalans later this week. So big effect on the training and preparation, I think, for Leeds there.
Yeah, it's in the week where you really want your coach on the ground dealing with everything, to be short-handed and to have James Webster basically taking charge with Sean Long doing what he can, and no JJB there. That's going to be quite an ask for them, but it's the sort of thing that becomes a galvanising factor as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and we are at the back end of the season now, so it's a group of players who've got used to being around each other, and there's some experienced players in there who'll take the lead on their parts of the job as well, wouldn't there? Gale, Pryor,
Myler.
Maybe Myler, yeah. Gale and Pryor and Thompson maybe as well in the pack, and Ferris, very experienced player, who can guide some of those other players in through training. So I don't know how much it will affect them, but it's certainly not ideal timing. What it makes me think about is, and we've seen all the Super League coming out with their kind of contingency plans, as it were, for the next couple of weeks, which I know has got no contingency plan for a grand final being rescheduled to a different date. It's weird because I know the clubs wanted it to end in November, but surely if we can't get it done on the 27th, can't we get it done on the 29th or 30th? But anyway, that's how it's been set out. But it brings into sharper focus, I think, at this time. I saw someone had put a picture of themselves on a Wigan fans Facebook group, getting a picture with Tony Clubb in the supermarket, and whilst everyone was masked up and they weren't quite in the same hugging arm round shoulder situation that you used to see these kind of pictures in, I'm thinking, fucking stay away from the players. Just stay away from everyone for like a month, guys, and the players need to stop going to the shops for ordering for a month, just a month, guys.
Well, you almost think there's got to be a sort of certain responsibility on the clubs to really say they need to minimise contact where they can.
Yeah, I don't know that the photograph was taken today or even this week, so...
Yeah.
But still.
But you think, you almost need to go to as close to a bubble situation as you can get.
I think so.
At this point, given that how critical it is and how, it's as much for the players as anything, because it's them that will suffer the consequences if half the team has to miss out and they end up having to play kids in the grand final.
No, exactly, yeah. Exactly. So hopefully this will be the last COVID-relevant piece of COVID positive news, that negative, positive, whatever. The COVID impact news that we'll have to talk about, because players will start shutting themselves away. What's next?
St Helens loose forward Morgan Knowles has signed a new 2-year contract which will keep him at the Super League club until the end of 2022. The 24-year-old who joined Saints aged 15 has scored 20 tries and 130 appearances for the club. He won 4 caps for Wales between 2015 and 2017, but recently switched his international allegiance to England.
Absolutely top performer. Probably not been quite as good this year as he was last year, but I feel that way about most players in the competition. He's a top performer, Morgan Knowles, for me.
Yeah, I think he's got a very good shot at getting into that England squad for the World Cup, hopefully next year.
Yep. Hull KR are to seek new investment through a private equity company, and Chief Executive Paul Lakin says the venture is a possible route for Super League to follow, which we have heard rumours of Super League looking at private equity investors for a while now. Rovers continue to have funding provided by Chairman Neil Hudgell, but as the club remains up for sale, Lakin returned to Rovers last month after spells as commercial roles at Stoke City and Wolverhampton Wanderers. Private equity getting their hands into the Super League. How do you, and your club in Super League as well, the Rovers. How do you feel about that, Tim?
I I think it's a good news on some respect that having a